Focus on Headline. And let's take a look at what major issues are making the headlines today on Focus on Headline. For this, joining us in the studio today, we have our reporters in Kim Min-ji and Yoon Se-young. Guys, welcome back.
Happy rainy Monday.
There's nothing happy about a rainy Monday. Can't be any gloomier than a Monday that rains. But we are going to start things off with some gloomy updates over in the Middle East. If you guys remember, on Friday, at the end of Focus on Headline, I did say that we are going to be watching very carefully the developments in the Middle East, as at that time, Iran had issued a statement saying that they are going to retaliate against an apparent Israeli attack on their consulate in Syria in the next 48 hours. Of course, come Saturday night local time, you saw just that. Hundreds of drones and missiles being fired at Israel, carrying out an airstrike in retaliation of their apparent airstrike by Israel on their consulate in Syria. Now, mind you, 99% of the attack was defended by Israel and its allies. But there's still the question now, despite Iran saying that they're not going to retaliate any further. What Israel is going to do next and what they do next will certainly shape how things are going to pan out in the Middle East. Se-young, you're going to start this off here. Certainly very concerning news that we're all watching right now.
Yes, the world is now paying close attention on the recent Iranian attack on Israel over the weekend. And it is seen as retaliation for Israel's bombing of an Iranian consulate in Damascus, Syria on April 1st, which resulted in the elimination of a senior commander of Iran's Revolutionary Guard. Of particular note is that this is Iran's first comprehensive attack on Israeli territory. And since the Islamic Revolution in 1979, relations between Iran and Israel, which used to be very friendly before, have been consistently hostile. But the latest exchange of direct attacks marks a significant escalation from the previously called shadow wars, where attacks were indirect. And according to local authorities and international reports, the Israeli military has stated that Iran launched more than 100 drones carrying explosive towards Israel. And fortunately, Israel has intercepted and, like you said, SJ, thwarted 99% of the Iranian assault. And while specific casualties are still being assessed, it is known that a 7-year-old girl has been seriously injured. And the successful interception was made possible by Israel's advanced mobile air defense systems, including the Iron Dome, and crucial support from allied nations such as the United States, the United Kingdom, and France, who swiftly responded to aid in defense efforts.
So if the defense system, which, like you said, includes the Iron Dome, I don't know if any of you guys seen video footages of how the Iron Dome actually works. It's actually pretty impressive. But allied countries helping them defend against the drone and missile attack. If it wasn't a 99% successful defense, and was something like, I don't know, even 80, 70%, you can certainly see that there was going to be a whole lot of casualties. But what would have happened would be certainly a retaliation from Israel. Now, because there wasn't a mass impact from the Iranian retaliation, there are people saying that, listen, don't escalate things any further. But still, it is up to Israel and the government there to make the decision there, which is why you had Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu convening an emergency meeting of the War Cabinet to respond to the situation. Tell us more about this.
Yes, as announced by the Prime Minister's office, Netanyahu convened an emergency war cabinet to discuss the situation late on Saturday night. And the Israeli aviation authorities have declared a closure of airspace starting from 12:30 a.m. on the 14th local time in response to the attack. And neighboring countries like Jordan and Iraq have also closed their airspace, and Egypt has heightened its air defense readiness. In the meantime, Iran's Revolutionary Guard has declared the attack a success and warned that no one will be able to escape retaliation if they attacked Iran's territory. And now, with uncertainty surrounding Israel's response, concerns and anxieties about potential escalation in the future are only growing.
Yeah, so the retaliatory airstrikes by Iran this was largely forecast. I mean, they said it themselves, right? In the next 48 hours, we're going to be conducting a retaliation attack. The U.S. knew about this. Israel knew about this. The whole world knew about this. It was just a matter of when it happened. And because of its preparations, they were able to largely defend everything. So everyone got all of the things out of the way, right? Iran was very upset at the attack in their consulate in Syria. Israel is also very upset that there was an attempt at their mainland Israel. And Iran coming out saying that we're done with the retaliation is big, right? Because now if Israel says we're very upset at this, despite the fact that we've defended most of your attacks, we're going to launch missiles left and right, that is going to be met with then a response from Iran. And the last thing you want is a full-blown war here, which is why we're watching carefully the situations and the developments that are happening at the War Cabinet, which took place. And from what I understand, there was some mixed opinions on what to do right now next, especially when the U.S. and some of its major allies of Israel are saying, stop, we cannot escalate this any further. We're not going to take part in any of the retaliatory attacks here. So, Minja, tell us about the meeting that followed through after the attack by Iran.
Sure. So today, Israel's wartime cabinet, led by Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, met to deliberate their next actions following Iranian strikes. These high-stakes meeting, which also included Defense Minister Yoav Gallant and Benny Gantz of the National Unity Party, ended without a clear resolution. So the meeting lasted 3 hours and was primarily focused on potential responses to Iran's aggressive maneuvers, which reportedly included launching up to 350 suicide drones and missiles missiles. Initially, Prime Minister Netanyahu had planned to discuss retaliation, but he shifted the agenda after a conversation with U.S. President Joe Biden, who has cautioned against actions that might lead to a broader conflict in the Middle East. The cabinet appears divided. While there is a consensus on the need for a response, the timing and intensity are points of contention. Defense Minister Gantz has advocated for a measured approach, emphasizing that Iran will be dealt with at the right time and in the right way. Contrastingly, figures from the far right, including National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir, are pushing for an immediate and forceful retaliation.
Again, with some of these internal disagreements within the War Cabinet, what should we expect moving forward, and what could be the next steps for Israel?
Well, the Israeli government is under significant pressure both domestically and internationally. So domestically, there are calls for swift action to restore deterrence against Iran. But internationally, however, there is substantial concern over escalating the conflict further. The death toll in Gaza has surpassed 33,000 since the conflict with Hamas has escalated last October, drawing widespread criticism. Prime Minister Netanyahu is expected to reconvene the wartime cabinet soon to continue the discussions. And despite the push from various members of his government for immediate action, Netanyahu's office has emphasized that no decision has been made yet, but they assure that Israel will respond decisively to Iranian aggressions.
Right. We got some updates here, live updates, where Israel pledged to exact a price from Iran after the weekend strikes here. And what we do, the other thing that wasn't mentioned as much is the fact that there was quite a bit of exchange of fire between Lebanon and the Israel Defense Forces at the border. And so the big fear here is that depending on the severity, or I guess the size of Israel's retaliatory measures, if there is, because there are a number of world leaders who are basically pleading with Israel. Listen, let's stop it here. You stopped their attacks. Iran came out saying they're not going to attack any further here. Let's kind of dead it here. You guys had their share of blowing out your steam here. This could potentially, again, blow up into a full-on war. And it's not going to involve just Iran and Israel. It's going to involve a number of other countries right now. And that's only judging by the fact that if that is the U.S., UK, France, and a number of Israeli allies don't get involved. So far, Biden has come out saying that he's not going to get involved whatsoever with any kind of retaliatory measure because he knows also that if he gets involved, it's world war. And so it's going to be quite concerning moving forward here because we know that there's going to be some sort of measure. But to what extent are the Israelis going to respond to this? We'll have to keep a close tab. We also had, because of the level of severity regarding the tensions on the Middle East. You had an emergency meeting at the United Nations Security Council. Iranian and Israeli ambassadors engaged in a heated exchange without conceding an inch. Seoul, let's get more on what happened at the UNSC.
Well, at the UNSC emergency meeting convened on Sunday at 4 p.m. local time in New York, Amir Saeed Iravani, the Iranian ambassador to the UN, asserted that Iran had no choice but to exercise its right to self-defense under international law in response to the previous attack carried out by Israel on technically Iranian territory. And he claimed that the legitimacy of the attack on Israel and at the same time emphasized that Iran has no intention of escalating tensions in the Middle East further. Iravani also stated that Iran has no intention of engaging in military conflict with the United States in the Middle East, seemingly in an attempt to deter U.S. intervention, considering its alliance with Israel. On the other hand, the Israeli ambassador continued to strongly condemn the Iranian regime, likening it to the Nazis, and urged the UNSC to take proactive measures to stop Iran, which poses a threat to global peace. Diplomats from other countries, excluding the conflicting parties, called for restraint and sought solutions to de-escalate tensions. And the United States, in particular, condemned Iran's retaliatory attacks, while clearly expressing caution against further escalation. And Vasily Nevenja, the Russian ambassador to the UN, shifted blame onto Western permanent members for not condemning Israel's bombing of the Iranian consulate in Syria, stating that they refused even to acknowledge the principle of inviolability of diplomatic mission under international law, again placing responsibility on the Western side. Meanwhile, Kim Sang-jin, the deputy ambassador of South Korea to the UN, stressed the importance of focusing on finding the most effective solutions rather than debating who triggered the current situation, and emphasized the immediate need to halt the escalating tensions in the already volatile Middle East region. And the South Korean government also took a stance, saying that it strongly condemned Iran's massive attack on Israel, and South Korea is closely monitoring the situation with deep concern, while urging all parties to refrain from aggravating the situation. So what's clear is that, as previously stated by UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres, it's widely agreed that now is the time for all countries to exercise restraint and seek de-escalation, as neither the Middle East nor the world can afford further conflict.
So, amongst the many people at the UN Security Council, ironically, what the Russian ambassador to the UN had said, I mean, he's not too wrong. Because, okay, so the thing is, it's still an apparent Israeli attack on the Iranian consulate in Syria, right? I mean, Israel has not come out saying that, yeah, we're responsible for this, and they're probably not going to. But judging by the way that even the United States and other countries, allies, Israel, is responding to all this, I think they all know that. I mean, Israel was kind of behind this, right? I mean, we can't still, though, to safely put it, we're going to still say an apparent attack by Israel, an alleged attack by Israel. But it's you don't see that often. A embassy at in another different country being attacked, right, with a number of high-ranking officials being killed there. I mean, that's a declaration of war.
Right. Imagine the other countries.
Oh, absolutely.
Has done the same
and
thing.
So that's why the condemnation is there, right? I mean, they're going to, and we've seen
like
that
North
with
Korea. What if North Korea has
North Korea's
attacked?
North Korea's kind of silent on this one. No, if North Korea did that, I mean, it's full-out war. But judging by the fact that, I mean, it's a lack of voices coming in for what Israel has done. And well, you could say that with Gaza too. But I think it's apparent right now. I think the only reason why the U.S. and some of the world leaders are saying we have to end it here, you guys did your part, is because they also do know that, in part, that Israel was responsible for the attack at the consulate in Syria. And so we'll see. But if there's anything that we've seen over the past several months now, Israel doesn't listen to its allies, and hopefully this doesn't escalate into, like I said, a full-blown war. Amidst the escalating tensions in the Middle East, we had the South Korean government announcing some economic decisions today, which directly affects millions of households. Minji, tell us more about today's announcement by the Ministry of Economy and Finance.
Well, in response to the ongoing instability in the Middle East, particularly due to Iran's attack on Israel and the consequent rise in global oil prices, the South Korean government has made a strategic move to alleviate some economic pressure here at home. Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Economy and Finance Choi Sang-mok announced today that the government will extend the current tax reduction on gasoline, diesel, and compressed natural gas for an additional 2 months. The gasoline fuel tax, which was significantly reduced last year, will continue to be levied at 615 won per liter, and this is 205 won lower than the standard rate, effectively making it a 25% reduction. For the average driver who travels about 40 kilometers a day in a car with a fuel economy of 10 kilometers per liter, this extension will mean a savings of approximately 25,000 Korean won, that is about $19 per month. The cuts are even deeper for diesel and LPG butane, maintaining a 37% reduction. Diesel will remain taxed at 369 won per liter, down 212 won, and LPG butane at 130 won per liter, down 73 won. The Deputy Prime Minister highlighted the volatile international oil market as a major concern, exacerbated by recent developments in the Middle East. Just this past week, the Brent crude soared to over $92 per barrel during trading, and it did close slightly lower, but this is the highest it's been in over 5 months and poses a significant threat to economic stability, given that higher fuel costs can translate to increased prices for daily goods like food.
So what we need to look at is the Dubai crude. I believe that's the benchmark for South Korea. And so Dubai crude right now actually did not rise as much. I mean, overall, global oil prices rose quite a bit because of the tensions in the Middle East. But the Dubai crude, I believe, it ended at $90.22 a barrel is what it is right now. But again, it seems like these tax cuts are just part of a broader economic strategy. Can you elaborate further on some of these measures, though?
Sure. So the government is positioning itself as what Choi Sang-mok called a strong fence to protect the livelihoods of its citizens from these external shocks. So they're not only extending tax cuts, but are also prepared to enact measures against excessive financial and foreign exchange market volatility. So by April 17th, they planned to propose amendments related to these tax cuts, emphasizing a commitment to stabilizing the economy in the face of these ongoing global challenges. So South Koreans can expect some relief from what could have been a sudden spike in fuel costs, which is crucial as the country also faces high prices for other essentials like food and vegetables. The government's proactive fiscal policies are aimed at cushioning the economic impact of the Middle East crisis on everyday life here. Furthermore, with an emergency response team ready, the government is gearing up to mitigate any further risks that may affect the energy and supply chains.
Now, the volatile situation in the Middle East has also affected the currency exchange rates. We've seen the U.S. dollar very, very strong against the Korean won over the past few months now, and it's actually surged to the 1,381 against the greenback in early trading on this Monday. This again influenced by the attack by Iran over the weekend. Taylor, let's get more on the currency exchange.
Sure. Today, the Korean currency closed at 1384.01 against the dollar, 8.61 higher than the previous trading day. And the exchange rate once rose to 1384.01 earlier today, again, and this marks the highest level since November 8th, 2022, when it reached 1394.61 nearly 17 months ago. And examining the reasons behind the rise in the Korean won-US dollar exchange rate, of course, the geopolitical risk in the Middle East intensified over the weekend led to a preference for safe haven assets. Additionally, the further increase in international oil prices could exacerbate inflation and contributing to the strength of the dollar. In response, Deputy Prime Minister Choi Sang-mok reiterated the government's stance during an emergency economic ministerial meeting held today, announcing the extension of fuel tax cuts for another 2 months. And this move aims to address excessive volatility in financial and foreign exchange markets with timely measures. And such unpredictable exchange rate exacerbates concerns for those already suffering from rising prices and economic instability, especially when the Middle East crisis is likely to remain unresolved. And until the situation stabilizes, global risk of sentiment is likely to strengthen, and domestic and international financial markets may experience increased volatility depending on developments such as Israel's response intensity and neighboring countries' involvement. Moreover, pundits warned of the potential expansion of uncertainties in economy, including domestic and international growth and inflation, depending on future movements in international oil prices, exchange rates, and changes in the global supply chain as well. Meanwhile, Deputy Governor of the Bank of Korea, Yoo Sang-dae, chaired a market situation assessment meeting today and stated that if there are concerns about increased financial market volatility, appropriate measures to stabilize the market will be implemented promptly.
So I mentioned this a bit briefly last week, but the big concern with the rising U.S. dollar plus the rising global oil prices is that the South Korea as a whole being heavily dependent on imports of crude, right? Especially, like I said, Dubai crude is the big thing here. And so not only is there a rise in prices of the oil, but the dollar goes, everything is being paid in U.S. dollars, which is why when we look at export figures and the U.S. dollar is up, it's good for exporters, right? Like Samsung Electronics, Hyundai, Kia and stuff like that. They're getting dollars and so they're making more. But also when it comes to imports, you're paying more than what it is. Because of the declining Korean won. But what's interesting here is if you look at the gold prices, right? Again, a safe asset during times like this. Global gold prices actually went up $1.40 per troy ounce. However, domestic gold prices actually dipped down quite a bit after peaking over the weekend. And so what does this signify? Is this just people selling because it's hit peak price? Or is it people going, well, it seems like we have to go U.S. dollar. U.S. dollar is the safe asset right now in a wartime situation. Anytime there's a heavy reliance on imports, dollars. Is that what they're going for? Who knows? But we're seeing an interesting movements on the market there. As we are talking about this mounting tensions on in the Middle East, there's also a glimmer of hope for the South Korean economy. The government has shared some optimistic forecasts for the nation's export figures. Minja, let's get the latest developments from today's emergency meeting held by the Ministry of Trade, Industry and Energy.
Certainly. So despite the troubling international landscape, South Korea's export sector appears not only resilient, but also poised to continue its growth. At an emergency meeting today in Sejong, chaired by First Vice Minister Kang Kyung-sung, key stakeholders reviewed the current export trends and strategized on navigating the potentially rough waters ahead. Vice Minister Kang reported that South Korea is on track to mark its 7th consecutive months of export growth, driven by strong performances in IT, semiconductors, automobiles, and shipbuilding. This is significant as these sectors are crucial to the country's economic backbone. And despite the escalations in the Middle East, the direct impact on South Korea's export operations has been minimal, with shipments and deliveries proceeding smoothly. So the government is proactively taking measures to mitigate these risks that may arise with the rising oil prices ahead, and they've established the export contingency team in collaboration with organizations like KOTRA, the Korea Trade Insurance Corporation, and various trade associations. Additionally, the government plans to expand its logistics support for exports, offer additional cargo space on ships, and provide special trade finance support to companies that are most affected by these global instabilities. The semiconductor industry, a flagship of South Korean exports, has been a major driver of economic growth, especially important now as the country contends with sluggish private consumption. The government's proactive stance is not just about sustaining growth, but also about stabilizing the broader economy amidst these global challenges.
Now, in light of the recent developments, again in the Middle East, we're also seeing significant impact on various domestic industries because of this. What can you tell us about the reactions across different sectors?
Well, the conflict between Iran and Israel is influencing global markets, particularly oil. South Korean refineries face a dual-edged scenario. Short-term gains from rising oil prices could quickly turn into losses if global demand drops due to prolonged conflict. The petrochemical industry is watching the naphtha prices closely, which is vital for production, but currently buffered by an oversupply. The shipping sector is on high alert, particularly around the Strait of Hormuz, a vital passage for global trade. And disruptions there could have significant implications for South Korea's largest carrier, HMM. And meanwhile, the construction industry, with sizable investments in the Middle East, is concerned about potential delays and rising costs from ongoing conflicts.
Yeah, if you see the markets today, it did very poorly. Actually rebounded a bit compared to the early trading hours, but the benchmark Kospi ended 0.42% lower. The tech-heavy Kosdaq, dropping 0.94%, and a lot of the major shares like Samsung Electronics shedding 1.79%. A lot of the tech industries actually did poorly here. But again, the Strait of Hormuz, we had incidents with the Strait of Hormuz in the past, and that delaying shipments and how that impacted South Korea's exports. Everything is linked right now. But at least according to what the industry ministry said today, I believe they're saying the supply of oil and LNG is plentiful for now. But they're going to be putting any kind of measures in place to make sure that it doesn't impact us too heavily here. Crash Override saying $92 a barrel. Venezuela isn't mad. Venezuela, I think, sells their oil goes for like $72 a barrel, which is far cheaper than what Dubai crude is. So, it's cheap. Maybe they're selling for maybe too cheap. When the economic situation is as tough as it is right now, you have most of the vulnerable group feeling the brunt of the pain. In response, the government has announced it will be allocating 31.4 trillion won in welfare spending in the first quarter alone to alleviate the hardships faced by the disadvantaged. Seoul, let's get more on this.
Earlier in January, the government unveiled its plan for the largest ever rapid execution of the first half budget to improve the perception of economic conditions among the public. And the plan aims to allocate 65% of the first half central government budget, the highest level in history, to initiatives that the public will feel as an improvement in economic conditions. And this accelerated spending by the government is seen as a response to the high inflation and interest rates. And as part of such plan, the Ministry of Economy and Finance intends to utilize 213.5 trillion won, an increase of 47.4 trillion won compared to the previous year for welfare spending. And out of this, 31.4 trillion won has been allocated for welfare measures targeting the elderly, low-income individuals, and youth. In addition to that, 7 trillion won will be dedicated to job support, including direct employment, while 8.9 trillion won will be invested in social overhead capital or SOC projects such as urban regeneration and national waterway maintenance. Meanwhile, 1.5 trillion won has been allocated for private investment, including management and inspection of projects like highway construction, and 34.7 trillion won will be used for livelihood projects, including special loans for parents with newborns. Now, we hope that these bold fiscal expenditures aim to alleviate the difficulties of ordinary people will be actually felt and appreciated in their daily lives.
Yeah, I think President Yoon and Prime Minister Han Duck-soo held their weekly meeting for the first time since the crushing defeat by the People Power Party during last week's April 10th general elections. And I think one of the things that President Yoon had emphasized during the meeting was that the current administration will continue to focus on people's livelihoods people's livelihoods. And so a lot of emphasis on people's livelihoods because there is a reason. I mean, things are pretty rough for the Korean people and everyone here in Korea because of inflation and a number of issues here. We're going to turn our focus to diplomatic affairs. U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations Linda Thomas-Greenfield's visit to South Korea, marking a significant diplomatic engagement amidst the growing global tensions. South Korean Defense Minister Shin Won-sik and U.S. Ambassador to the UN sitting down to discuss North Korea policies, among other pressing security issues. Minji, let's get more on this.
Sure. So Ambassador Linda Thomas-Greenfield's visit is notably significant as it's the first by a U.S. ambassador to the UN at the ministerial level since 2016. She arrived yesterday to Korea and met with South Korea's Defense Minister Shin Won-sik and Foreign Minister Cho Tae-il today afternoon. So during their talks, Ambassador Thomas-Greenfield underscored the illegal advancement of North Korea's nuclear and ballistic missile programs, which is a clear violation of UN Security Council resolutions. She highlighted a recent setback where a Russian veto at the Security Council prevented the extension of a panel of experts overseeing sanctions on North Korea. And this could potentially lead to a gap in enforcing sanctions and inadvertently aid North Korea in enhancing its nuclear capabilities. Both sides voiced their concerns over growing instability in global security dynamics and acknowledged the strategic importance of the Korean Peninsula. They emphasized the need to fortify the U.S.-ROC alliance to maintain peace and stability in the region and the world. Minister Shin Won-sik outlined South Korea's commitment to implementing UN resolutions and contributing to peacekeeping efforts. Meanwhile, Ambassador Thomas-Greenfield welcomed all these efforts and discussed identifying joint projects where both nations can collaborate effectively. Ambassador Thomas-Greenfield's visit to South Korea will also include trips to demilitarized zones, meeting with young North Korean defectors, and a session with students at Ewha Women's University. And after concluding her schedule here in South Korea, she will visit Japan to meet with families of the abductees.
Let's move on with some news of what happened over the weekend. We briefly touched upon a high-ranking Chinese official visiting Pyongyang and what that could mean. You had Chinese state-run Xinhua News Agency saying Zhao Lizi, he is the third-ranked member of the Chinese Communist Party's Politburo Standing Committee, having met with Kim Jong-un during his visit. And it's been reported that the two pledged to further enhance cooperation between their countries. Nothing new here. Seoul, let's get more on this.
Sure. We have a phone interview with an expert in the second part of the show, so I'm just going to briefly walk you through what happened over the weekend in Pyongyang. According to the Korean Central News Agency, North Korean leader Kim Jong-un met with Zhao Lizi at the headquarters of the Workers' Party of Korea on Saturday to discuss expanding and strengthening friendly cooperation and relations between the two countries. And such meeting took place on the occasion of Year of DPRK-China friendship, and there Kim emphasized the long-standing traditional relationship between the two nations and discussed ways to further develop friendly economic cooperation through various exchanges. And Kim also expressed wishes for the boundless development of North Korea and China's socialism and extended his best wishes for the everlasting prosperity of China under President Xi Jinping. And Kim himself also saw off Zhao and other members of the delegation and bid them farewell as they left the meeting, which underscores the extent of his favorable attitude toward China and the urgency of the alliance between North Korea and China as well. And as previously mentioned, Zhao Lezi holds the third highest position in the Chinese Communist Party, and Zhao is the first high-ranking Chinese official to visit the North since the outbreak of COVID-19 pandemic in early 2020. And this year also marks the 75th anniversary of the establishment of diplomatic relations between Pyongyang and Beijing.
Relations between North Korea and China has changed a lot ever since North Korea started really going out there with their provocations and rhetorics and left and right. And as they've been isolated, I think China is playing it a little bit different with Russia. Russia's already isolated, so they need all the friends they can. So the relationship's a little bit different. I think China is playing it a bit ambiguously there, but still being that they're a long traditional ally. They still need to take part in these ceremonies and so forth. I got some updates on what's going on in the Middle East. The Israeli War Cabinet, they're going to be meeting again to weigh response to Iran's attack because they haven't gotten a consensus on what exactly they would do. And so really news that we're going to keep a close tab on and update all of our listeners on as well. Guys, thank you very much for your news updates. Have a safe one, and we'll see you guys again.
Thank you.
You can listen to Korea Now with me, SJ Lee, by downloading the Arirang Radio application or tune in online by visiting www.arirangradio.com. So make sure you tune in Mondays through Fridays, 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. Korea time.